Since we spoke last, I've clarified that is how my last name is pronounced.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm glad I pronounced it correctly. Okay. PowerPoint? No? No PowerPoint? Okay, great. Whenever you're ready.
So I'm glad that I got to go last because it gave me a chance to rewrite my presentation. Just want to make a comment about the previous delegation there. So he brought up the Ottawa situation from 2 weeks ago, and I think this is the problem when we look at the news and we don't really dive into the nuance of it. I know that parent, his name's Nick Morabito. I've spoken on the phone with him 3 times since his delegation, and last Friday he actually called me out of the blue because he wanted my opinion as someone who's transgender on the washroom stuff that he proposed. And I had a really intimate conversation with him about the complexities of it, and he listened, and we're not on the same page, him and I. And I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's easy to fearmonger by going ahead and repeating something that you really don't know a lot about. It's undeniable that gender transitions have increased dramatically in our schools. Tonight, we've heard from parents regarding books, but we've also heard discussions of other tenets of transgender care. I would like to speak from a different angle and discuss what happens in our classrooms once a cross-gender identity has been established. This is known as social transition. Policies and procedures guiding the care of transgender students have rapidly evolved in the last 10 years. I know that this board has a desire to ensure gender dysphoric students are provided an environment where they can thrive. This is encouraging. WRDSB has a policy to utilize whichever pronouns and names a student indicates they find most affirming. I'm glad that our educators are eager to support transgender children who undergo transition. I agree with earlier parents who spoke this evening that it is not the responsibility of the school to evaluate whether or not transition is the appropriate path forward for a given student. This is the responsibility of the healthcare system, and this is the responsibility of the parents. Unfortunately, WRDSB has adopted a policy by which students who do not wish to have their parents notified will be allowed to socially transition at school while having this withheld from their parents. This is done at the student's discretion. This overstep of parental rights is dangerous and irresponsible. How will we ensure that appropriate mental health and medical supports are available to the student on this journey if the parents are kept in the dark? You won't and you can't. For those of you who were once children, you'll remember that the quest for belonging that encompasses childhood. Identity is core to young and old alike, and for a child, conceptualization of identity is especially unstable. Children find identity in their friendships, hobbies, and interests, life successes, religion, personal characteristics, and more. Do we not each remember our search to find our unique place within our childhood contexts? It's easy to create an image in our mind of a child who adopts a cross-gender identity. Many of us might picture a little boy or girl who has never fit in with the stereotypes of their assigned gender. We might imagine a child who excels dramatically once they are affirmed as their preferred gender and suddenly makes an 180-degree turn from their previous unworkable life. Is that what you picture? It's what I had pictured until recently when I've had the privilege to connect with physicians, therapists, researchers, and detransitioners who are the most well-informed in North America on this topic. Poster child stories like the one above do exist, but they're not even almost the complete picture. Comorbidity with individuals is commonplace, and a significant overlap is seen between individuals with gender dysphoria and those who experience autism, mood and identity disorders, borderline personality disorder, and more. For some children, a classroom transition perpetuates or is the resultant of underlying conditions that require professional attention. Identity is complicated. This is not school counselor level stuff. These conditions require expertise from clinicians to comprehend and diagnose. But it's just a name and pronouns, some say regarding social transitions. The defense is that a social transition has no material impact, so we don't need to be so concerned. After all, it's just as easy for a child to switch back if they find that it doesn't work for them, isn't it? These are important questions being explored right now in the medical and research community about the relative benefits and risks of social transition for children. New findings from multiple gender clinics in the United States and Europe are raising question about the efficacy and risks of childhood transition. The results of these systematic reviews are preliminary, and there's much still to be learned.
Excuse me, Ms. Malott, I thought your delegation was on pronouns. Preferred names and pronouns.
Preferred names and pronouns, that is correct. That's also known as social transition, because when a child socially transitions at school, that is not hormonal intervention or surgical intervention, that is the utilization of the names and the pronouns for which they prefer.
Continue.
I'm good to continue, thank you. The results of these systematic reviews are preliminary, and there is much still to be learned. But what we know with certainty is that social transition is not merely as simple as names and pronouns. This is a profound intervention. We know this, after all. Isn't this the argument for why we proceed in the first place? We must remember that there is a social cost to desysting, and when the detransitioner is reverting their names and pronouns. Unlike a sexual identity like being gay or bi, a cross-gender identity is salient to everyone. Every teacher you have, every student you interact with, they all know about your gender identity. It's something you literally wear on your face. Backing this identity out once you form friendships and social standing under this identity is not nearly as trivial as it may sound. There can be a lot of momentum keeping you moving forward. It is the same momentum that allows each of us to maintain stable cultural, religious, and interest-based identities once we cultivate them. Now, clearly, this is not within the school's responsibility or expertise to vet whether or not transition is appropriate for a given child. This is why we have a healthcare system. This is why psychiatrists exist. Mental health and psychiatric support are effective in helping to sort through these complex feelings and emotions. But that support can only happen if the medical community are involved throughout the process, and the connection between the school and the healthcare system is the family. I do truly understand the motivation of your policy. I was 12 years old when I came to understand myself as transgender. I was deeply ashamed and embarrassed, and I did not want my parents to find out at any cost. I went to unbelievable lengths to ensure anything related to my identity was kept completely out of reach from my parents. The thought of my parents knowing brought me panic attacks. But do you know what else was also true? My parents were kind and loving individuals. They would not have approved of my transgender identity had I shared it with them when I was a child, just as they do not approve of it today. But I would not have been in danger. Having my parents find out would have been the best outcome for me and for them. By hiding this from my parents, I lived a double life and refined the art of lying to them, not about trivial matters, but about the core of who I was and how I saw myself in the world. In turn, my parents were deprived of the opportunity to know the person who I felt I was. See, this is what's so concerning about this policy. We are isolating these children from both their families and the medical support community. Maybe social transition is the right fit for a given child, but who is helping the child in this? How do you expect this to unfold if we exclude the parents? When you transition in part of your life, but not everywhere, it is natural to invest only in the relationships where you feel affirmed and let those not in the loop slip further away. The dissonance between the two competing social circles, the one where you're affirmed and the one where you are not, can bring even more intense dysphoria. Identity is complicated and transition is complicated. This is beyond the expertise of even an equity preoccupied school board like WRDSB. In this discussion, we must acknowledge that there are children and families where credible concerns exist about coming out at home. We know that this is not most households, but it does exist. And we already have a mechanism in place to handle these heartbreaking situations, and you've alluded to it in this meeting 3 times so far tonight, Chair. When a teacher or educator holds bona fide concern about the safety of a student's household, we direct this to the attention of the Children's Aid Services. CAS is able to actually do something to support these families in a way that the school cannot. It's their job and they are good at it, and they have the power to access the household, the parents, and the medical records. They can support the family in ways that our educators could never hope to achieve. My family has had personal experience working with CAS, and I know firsthand their ability to both investigate risk and support well-meaning families who may be struggling with how to support their child. But this is the paradox. We call a parent if a child misbehaves in class. We partner with parents when a student's falling behind in their studies. It is bewildering to me that I need to provide written consent to have my grade 11 daughter's photo taken at school, to allow her to attend a school dance, or even to walk her to the courthouse to attend a mock trial in her class. Will the willful intent of this board be kept in the dark when my child expresses the desire to proceed down a path of hormonal and surgical intervention? We can do better, and we must do better. This board asserts that it is not your responsibility to help a child navigate the physical and emotional complexities of gender transition. You're correct, it's not. It is not your responsibility. It is the responsibility of the legal guardian and of the healthcare system. Let them do their job. There is nothing under the Education Act or regulation under the Act that prevents parental notification in this respect. Section 303 does not apply. The only thing excluding parents from being involved is this board's decision to do so under policy 1235. Please consult the doctors and psychiatrists who understand transition in its full complexity. Consult the detransitioners whose lives have been forever altered by regret. WRDSB students will be amongst their ranks in a couple years, and we can help prevent those outcomes now. Transition may be right for some. Transition will not be right for everyone. Let's embrace that complexity. Let's work with parents rather than working against them and supporting them in loving their children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malott. Trustee, I'm going to go trustee Wasim this time. She beat you to it this time. Go ahead, trustee Wasim.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair, to the delegate, thank you for your remarks in your presentation. Just a question regarding the role of, you're talking about procedure 1235. When you spoke to your parents about your transition, although they were not supportive, you were not in harm. And that's amazing for you. Do you know if all students would have the same experience though?
Ms. Malott?
Through the chair to the trustee, that's an excellent question. And I absolutely cannot guarantee that any given student within the WRDSB system has a safe household. What I do know is that we have a procedure in place for teachers when they believe abuse might be in place in order to work with CAS to investigate.
Follow up, trustee Wasim, or no?
Yes, just a quick follow-up. When it comes to procedure 1235, it does not handle any medical transitions. And I could be wrong on this, but according to Google, in Canada, the age to transition at earliest can be 16, but you need parental consent. So if a student wanted to medically transition, they would have to speak to their family anyway and get their consent. So when you were speaking about getting these different services involved, are you aware that this procedure 1235 that you were referencing does not handle anything related to medical transitioning?
Ms. Malott?
Correct. Yeah, I am absolutely aware of that. What's concerning, however, is that when students are telling our teachers and our educators that that's what they wish to pursue, when they tell their teacher that I wish to be transgender, I wish to have these surgeries and hormone interventions in my future, we have no obligation under this policy to tell the parents. We, as teachers, are in fact instructed not to tell the parents if we don't know explicitly from that student that they want their parents to be notified. This is an exception in how we're doing education. In almost every other respect, we keep the parents in the loop. Why is this different? Why is this being treated differently?
Thank you. Trustee Watson?
Thank you. I would also like to forward this information to staff. I also have a question. So through you to the delegate, when you mentioned 1235, and without going into exactly what you're saying, you don't approve of it. So what would you like to see in that policy?
Ms. Malott?
Absolutely. So through the chair to the trustee, there are examples of policies in at least one school board in Ontario where under the age of 16, parental notification is required. It's not even parental consent, it's parental notification. It's, by the way, this has happened. Your kid has asked for this in the classroom. And so we are going to be addressing your child as this, and we're going to be using these pronouns so that the parents have the right to parent their child. That's what I'm asking for in Waterloo here, is to include the parents, to respect the parents, and not to assume ill intent from parents unless there is a bona fide reason to assume that. And if there is, we can follow the procedure that we follow in all other cases. The procedure that's been outlined several times in this meeting already by the chair, which is to go through CAS and let them investigate if this is a real concern or if this is a concern that doesn't have substance behind it.
Okay, follow up, trustee Watson?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that the delegates information and suggestion be forwarded to staff so that staff can respond to the delegate and about your suggestions, and that we have a recorded vote.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Trustee Ramsey? Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Trustee Woodcock?
I have a clarification question through you, Madam Chair. So this is being referred to staff for a response to questions or as input for an admin procedure change?
Trustee Watson?
Both.
Trustee Woodcock? For both.
To be taken into consideration or being directed to change it?
Obviously in consideration.
Trustee Watson?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Obviously in consideration.
in consideration. Thank you for that clarification. I saw trustee Wasim you're speaking to the motion to refer to staff. Is that correct?
Yes, just had the same question as trustee Woodcock.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Radlin on the motion to refer to staff?
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. I'm wondering, I thought procedure 1235 referred to pronouns. Is there, I'm not comfortable voting on this when I haven't seen the procedure that we are asking to be changed.
Okay, this is it's to refer to staff for them to take it under consideration. We're not directing staff to change a procedure.
Take what under consideration?
The delegation's suggestion to change it.
Well, that's what I mean.
Okay,
Because my understanding of the procedure is different.
okay. Thank you. No one else to speak to the motion to refer to staff?
Yeah, the
Trustee
motion
Johnson?
to refer, I can appreciate the delegates saying what they have and raising the questions, but I'm very confident that the staff have already put enormous amount of thought, consultation with several professionals already on the decision to come to this spot. I'm not a fan of giving the staff extra work to do when I know they've already put an enormous amount of thought into it at this point. And my one concern too could be is that yeah, I just don't want to see something that causes more animosity or frustration down the road too, when this has already been pretty thoroughly discussed as a staff and considered, and lots of consultations been involved in this too. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at this, is like, I kind of get why you want some answers to this, but I think it's already been thoroughly thought through. That's just my thought.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Watson?
Yeah, just a correction. There was no consultation on this policy. There was no
It's an
consultation.
admin procedure. It's not a policy, first of all.
Right,
So,
but with the policy 123 or the procedure,
so you're not aware of any consultation happening
No.
on that? Thank you.
it's a procedure.
Thank you.
Point of
Okay.
information.
Trustee Woodcock?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just, it's been the practice of the board that, the Board of Trustees are the ones responsible for making sure that consultation happens with policies and that procedures, are, developed by staff to implement the policies. But just so folks are aware.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Okay, Trustee Rodlin for the second time. Okay, hang on. Okay, we'll finish this motion, then I need a motion to extend. So, but we'll finish this. Go ahead, Trustee Radlin.
So just clarifying, Trustee Woodcock, you're saying that the policy is determined by the trustees as governance and the procedures as staff as operation.
Yes, that's correct.
And operations are not the responsibility of trustees.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Johnson for the second time.
Just wanted, is it possible to ask staff for a little bit of clarification, because I can't imagine this procedure being put in place without there being enormous consultation or discussing this with layers of experts. So there's an assumption here that this hasn't been thoroughly looked at. And I believe it has been.
The motion to refer to staff is not usually when we ask questions of staff.
Right.
So I hesitate to open that as
Okay.
a
Fair?
practice
Right.
at our board. Okay, Trustee Watson?
So I just wanted to state some clarity, because the delegation is talking about procedure. We are forwarding her suggestions on to the director, which is in charge of procedure. We are not taking upon ourselves. So I just want that clarification. We're not taking the suggestions to the board. We're bringing those to staff who are in control of procedure.
Okay,
We are
thank you.
we are in charge of policy.
Thank
So
you.
we are letting staff answer those questions and coming back with a response to the delegation's suggestion.
Okay, thank you. And you asked for a recorded vote, so we will do that, and then I will ask for a motion to extend.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will start with trustee Cody.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson,
No.
trustee Meisner,
Opposed.
trustee Piatkowski,
Opposed?
trustee Rodlin,
Opposed.
trustee Ramsey,
In favor?
trustee Snyder,
Opposed.
trustee Wasim,
Opposed.
trustee Watson,
In favor.
trustee Woodcock,
Opposed?
student trustee Reyna,
Opposed?
student trustee Sorer.
Opposed.
Thank you. That's 3 in favor, 7 opposed, and that's defeated.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a motion to extend to, what are we at here? 9:30 till 10 o'clock. Moved by trustee Johnson, seconded by trustee Watson. All in favor of extending till 10 o'clock? Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. Okay. Back to questions of clarification. I have student trustee Soro.
Through you, Madam Chair, my question was related to the motion that we just voted on, so.
Thank you. Trustee Pytowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the delegation. I'm blessed to have a number of trans people in my life that I've spoken to on issues like this, and I have to say that their point of view is quite different than yours, and I'm wondering if you would acknowledge that perhaps you are in a minority in the trans community in taking this position.
Trustee,
Point of order
That is a question of clarification.
is unacceptable. It is questions about clarification.
I am seeking
I-
to clarify whether the delegate will acknowledge that they are in the minority position in the
Okay.
trans.
no, trustee Pytowski, just a minute. Trustee Watson, just a minute. I've heard your point of order. And I will rule in favor, and I will ask trustee Pytowski if he would like to rephrase.
Is your position shared by others in the trans community?
Thank you. Ms. Malott?
Through the chair to the trustee, yes. And while this might be surprising, not a lot of people in the trans community are prepared to get up here and publicly say the things that I'm saying, because there is a lot of hate towards transgender people from those who do not accept our existence. And there's also a lot of hate towards transgender people who say anything that goes outside of the standard kosher proper trans narrative that you're supposed to hold. So do people tell me that they feel this way? Absolutely. Do I get those comments online? Absolutely. Do I get those comments in person? People who I know? Yes. Are those people prepared to come and put themselves on the line to publicly speak to these things? No, I think in many cases they're not.
A follow-up, trustee Pytowski?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Meisner.
Through the chair, thank you for your delegation. I really appreciate the way that you shared your personal story. You did mention that when you were 12, you were terrified to have your parents find out about the fact that you wanted to transition. Would it have been helpful to have somebody who you could have trusted, a teacher, somebody in the classroom situation that you could have gone to? And I understand what you're saying about the fact that they're not experts, but they could have set the process. Would you have felt better with somebody you could have trusted with this issue?
Ms. Malott?
I think that is essential. As I've told you in previous meetings, I didn't transition as a child. That was very difficult back then. I transitioned when I was 28. And I had someone in my life who was that individual who I kind of came out to, and he was supporting me and helping me figure out what was going on. And I did exactly what I described. I invested very deeply in that person. I dissociated the rest of my life, and that resulted in my divorce because it pulled me away from my family in such a way that I was completely disconnected from them, and I hurt a lot of people in the process. So yes, if what you're suggesting is that we should allow students to emotionally invest in their teacher at the expense of being connected with their family and allow that to get in the way, then sure. But I don't think that's what teachers are for. I don't think that's what this board is for. I think that this is where the medical community, people who understand mental health, need to come in and support the situation. And that's not something that the school can do.
Follow-up, trustee Meisner?
Through the chair, I'm not suggesting that we do it at the expense of the family. But this is a challenging time. I've worked with some students who've gone through this. And that sometimes that bridge, that person you can trust to make that connection is essential. I don't want anybody to think we're talking about at the expense of things. But I do think that in this case, we do have people who can take people and put them in the right direction, connect them with the people that you're talking.
Question,
Sorry,
trustee Meisner?
yes. My apologies, I don't have a question.
Okay,
I
thank
just
you.
didn't want you to think of that case.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Wasim? Sorry, 1 second. Do you have a question, trustee Johnson? Or no?
Yes.
Okay, trustee Wasim, I'm gonna hold because you are on my list for the second time, so trustee Johnson for the first time.
What I heard in your presentation, to the chair, is a concern about tying transness with mental health and mental health needs. And, if I just, in your opinion, do you see transness and mental health as woven together, or can transness just be a separate part of figuring yourself out?
Through the
Ms.
chair. So through the chair to the trustee. I am not calling being transgender a mental health concern. What I am suggesting is that there is a strong comorbidity between mental health concerns and being trans. And I say that having diagnosis of my own. That doesn't mean that they always exist, but we know that there is a correlation there. This is very clear in the literature. This is very clear for people who work closely with transgender individuals. And there's lots of debate right now about whether or not the mental health concerns may lead to that identity, whether or not the mental health concerns arise because of the lack of acceptance of that identity. This is not clear, and I'm not in any way indicating that we have those answers, but we do know that they coexist. And when you have comorbidities, it is challenging to suss those out without expertise in this. There are people who do understand this, but they're not our teachers. Understandably, this is not their job. And that's why I would encourage this board to engage with the medical community when individuals come forward and ask for a change like names and pronouns in the classroom. And the mechanism to do that, as always, is to go to the parents. This is what we do in every other case. If we have concerns related to healthcare, is we go to the parents and we say, we think that your child needs this. That's very common.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up.
Quick follow-up.
A quick follow-up. Yeah. It was there, and so. And is there so you talked about how if a teacher thinks that the student's well-being is going to be harmed because they come out and talk to the parents about it, we call Family and Children's Services. I think in the schools that we deal with this middle ground. We do deal with extreme cases, but we're very, very careful about calling Family and Children's Services. And in fact, we wait for the most extreme reasons to call Family and Children's Services, and we think, and there's this middle ground where we just tell a student, just come on in and be you. Come on in and be you.
Question?
Is there, how would you say to handle that middle ground?
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair to the trustee, I would suggest that we know we've passed that line when we feel like we can't talk to the parents. I talk to teachers a lot. My daughter's in grade 11, and nonetheless, we have conversations quite often about a lot of different things. And especially with younger kids, that happens even more. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's because we have an open, transparent connection between teachers and parents. We understand that teachers and parents both have a role in the upbringing of children. And what I'm pointing to is this isolated situation, which for some reason we feel is appropriate to explicitly not go to the parents on. And if that's truly how we feel, if we feel there's a bona fide reason why there's a risk to the kids to go to the parents, then that is when CAS comes in. Just like we do with abuse. If we think that there's a bona fide concern that a kid is going to be hit at home, when we give them their report card and they did very poorly, then we're going to involve CAS.
So there's no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, it's already quite late. Okay, trustee Wasim for the second time.
Yes, thank you. Through you, chair, to the delegate. I understand the challenges that come with children and families sometimes growing further apart, and I understand that for every family it's to some extent it is important to keep those bonds strong. That being said, the policy that you have concerns with in the Ontario Human Rights Code, misgendering someone is a form of discrimination. Are you aware of this?
Okay,
It
just to
is
clarify,
in your
it's a
personnel code.
admin procedure, but go ahead, Ms. Malott, answer the question otherwise.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, just a question about pronouns. Are you aware that in the Ontario Human Rights Code, it states that misgendering someone is classified as discrimination?
Ms. Malott?
Through the chair to the trustee, does it say that in the Human Rights Code, or does it say that in the recommendations that have been put out by the Human Rights Commission? Because those are not the same thing.
It says it in the Ontario Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, so that's not the same thing as the Ontario Human Rights Code. Those are guidelines that are put out based on the code. I'm not saying that they're not connected, but it's not the same thing.
Okay, thank you for the distinction.
Okay, thank you. Student trustee Sora, do you have a second question or no?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you for your delegation.